Okay. Wanted to get a discussion going with you regarding programming, programming for, let's just say, like specific physical capacities. This was a discussion that I was having with a colleague a couple of days ago, just regarding plant like programming for like a general like a general program like a traditional S&C program. We're also talking about programming for injury specific stuff. And so we were having this discussion over coffee, and I was kind of filling him in on, conjugate strategy, so on and so forth. And he was adamant that it was important that in any program to only highlight one or maybe two things that you're trying to program for in that program, um, which to me sounds like a very sort of linear periodized model. And I know we've talked about that in the past in some subscriber videos. We've probably even written about it on Substack, if I remember correctly. So, in your with your knowledge, how would you have contributed to that discussion if you were sitting there with us? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know if
mean,
that's not, I don't know if that's enough of a segue, but what are your views on training for multiple things and whether that can be done, and how you would maybe, if you were in that discussion, how you maybe would have not necessarily convinced him, but added to the topic.
yeah, okay. This is so one, I obviously 100% disagree with that statement.
As did I. Yes.
So so I think this is what happens when people say you have to train one or two things, or you have to focus on one or two things. That may be the case in beginners. That may be the case in untrained. But at absolute, we focus on high performance. And the reason why we focus on high performance is because if you can solve the big problem of high performance, you solve the small problems of low performance. It sounds
Okay.
messed up, right? That kind of goes off the back of what like Louis would always tell me. Like what works for NASCAR doesn't like your Honda Civic, like they don't really care. Like
Oh, you mean
NASCAR
so all
doesn't
those guys
care.
that soup up their Honda Civics, they're not going to compete in NASCAR?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like the NASCAR probably isn't going to them and being like, "Hey, how do you make that loud humming noise?" Right? They're more into like, the actual okay, so part of the thing is like the reason why we're so hyper focused on high performance is because if you solve the high performance problem, you unlock all the smaller problems under that umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
Okay.
great. Yeah.
Secondarily, high performance has not technically been defined in a way where a programmer knows what to do with that information. Most of the time, it's kind of like this emergent thing that can't be defined. But what we've said is we've said that high performance can be defined. It's a conjugation of absolute strength, speed strength, reactive strength, and joint function, all converging to give you high performance, right? So imagine all four of those things colliding at once, and then boom, you get high performance.
Correct.
Okay. And we were just having this discussion on a book that we're both reading, how it's like you need all four of those because if you don't have one, the system will collapse.
Yes. I brought that up to you, and now you just brought it back up to me because in the last few days I had forgotten about that point. 100%.
Okay. So if you think about it, like I treated guys at Westside Barbell from 2011 on. So if you look at a West Side Barbell template, that's why we accredit Louis Simmons specifically with initiating what we call like the neurological Big Bang. He figured out how to scale up the nervous system. How do we know this? Because like I'm at the gym training the last Sunday. Two old school powerlifters. These guys were around like back in the 80s. So like the older guys that I still treat from West Side, like these guys competed with and trained with,
Okay.
right? Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Hmm.
So so that was kind of like the what am I so that was in talking to them, which both of them have joint and reactive strength injuries, which is part of my point, right?
But
Because
also not
that
surprising.
yeah, because essentially like when you look at the system that Louis Simmons, right, he figured out how to do dynamic effort and max effort for the nervous system and then repeated efforts for the muscle, but joint and connective tissue wasn't there.
Hmm.
So the reason why a lot of these guys now, Tony Ramos, full circle fusion, right? Like all these guys, like the reason why these joint replacements happen is because joint function wasn't trained. So that system totally collapsed, which then removed them from the level of training and level of competition. Okay. So like that's common knowledge to us, but I don't know that that's common knowledge because people still utilize those templates and they're just asymmetrically scaling up their nervous system and the red tissue that produces force to then position themselves for a joint and connective tissue injury, which is joint function and reactive strength. Right. So so now with that being said, does that make sense? Right.
Totally. Yep.
Okay. And
Very
so
clear. Very clear.
and so these guys were complaining, right? Because they were essentially saying like, hey, that era is over, right? And they're technically correct. But what's interesting is when you understand that, now you understand what geared powerlifting is. So geared powerlifting was to continue to push that neurological paradigm because it let the nervous system still scale and based off of like, I don't know, I think they call it cognitive embodiment, where it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the the shirts start to get mapped into the nervous system, and the nervous system thinks it has all this tissue, and therefore output continues to increase. Right, like that's the reason why Louis was so interested in the shirts is because it allowed him to get more all-time world records. Right, because they didn't care about joint function or reactive
Yeah. Right.
strength, which
Right.
is the reason why none of that stuff was ever trained there. Anyway, getting back to that, or getting back to, so now that we understand that high performance is essentially a conjugation of these four elements of point B converging at once at the level of competition, now we're in a position where we don't have a choice but to train four things. So it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what your belief is. If you think that you're linear base periodization, your phasic train, like it doesn't matter what it is, because now what we're essentially saying is these four elements have to be present, right? And if they're not present, you're not going to get high performance, and the system may collapse. So NBA playoffs, the Achilles tendons continue to collapse, right? They have an unloading protocol or whatever their philosophy is, and you saw what happened when reactive strength wasn't appropriately trained. What happened? They were removed from the level of competition, right? So we have to train for all four, but more importantly, we can train for all four.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
okay. Like people act like this is like some Herculean task. It's not, right? It's like somebody if somebody can juggle three balls, you can juggle four,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why we have the inside out special strength model so that you can know exactly what needs to be programmed for. But let me give you a very I'll take you through like bodybuilding
Okay.
to kind of disprove that you can only do certain things during certain blocks.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So if you think about it, a bodybuilder is going to change body composition, meaning that they're going to burn fat but build muscle at the same time.
Okay.
So right there, so you have a change in body composition, right? Also at that time, you're training for muscular hypertrophy, right? So you're getting a change in body composition and you're increasing muscular hypertrophy. But at the same time, to increase muscular hypertrophy in the sport of bodybuilding, everybody has a different philosophy on how to do it, but everybody at the end of the day, from a programming perspective, does the same thing because Um, so I'll kind of walk you through like basically how I like to train.
Okay.
Okay. So how I like to train is I like to do specific muscle groups. So like let's say yesterday was a lower day for
Okay.
me, right? So what I'll do is essentially I do my cardio, right? Which is I'm doing the cardio not just for zone two on heart, but I'm doing it for like the connective tissue of my legs to put a ton of blood volume in there
Okay.
because I get tons of blood into my legs and then I can feel my legs, right? Then I do calves, then I did hamstrings, right?
Okay.
Then I did Bulgarian split squats because I told you this is when I called you and you showed me the oscillating isometric muscle actions for my
Correct.
rectus
Yep.
femoris because I can't. Okay, so muscle building, and then normally what I would do there is I would do a heavy effort set, meaning I'm picking a load that I'm going to fail for 4 to 7. And what that's going to do is that's going to scale up the large fast twitch motor muscle fibers with my neural network because it's kind of like this Goldilocks zone where you get both. Like so you
Okay.
get bigger, but you also get stronger.
Okay.
So just in that, like so now what I'm saying is you're creating muscular hypertrophy and also getting stronger within one set. So
Multiple things right there.
so right there, right? So okay, and then what happens is when you get stronger, so when the because remember the neural network like the neural network will scale up from that, and as the neural network scales up you can now leverage it into other let's say body parts,
Right.
right? So the nervous system is continuing to scale while the muscle tissue is also scaling.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, now stay with me, but I'm also doing joint function and I'm
Because
also
it's a
doing
tweak there.
connective tissue stuff.
Yeah.
So like I'm doing cars, I may be doing pails and rails if I have to expand space, but I'm doing all of this stuff within the same week. I have
Sure.
to.
Sometimes within the same session.
Correct. Right. And so like you're training all of that in, and so when you look at it from a programming perspective, why is it that people don't think that that can be done? This is what I think. They don't understand that what's a stimulating intensity for the bottom up element of reactive strength is not a stimulating intensity for the top down.
Ah, very
Okay, so
important.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're getting confused because they think that stimulating intensity means high intensity.
Which means
Nowhere in
hard.
exercise.
Everything has to be hard.
Correct.